This podcast is sponsored by Tusk, an open source non-ICO crypto project powered by community. Check them out on the web at tusk.network. That's TUSC.network. The Rob McNealy program is the nexus of cryptocurrency, blockchain technology, and entrepreneurship. Now, welcome to the program. Today, I am talking to Jason Brown as he has head of business development for Komodo Platform, and I'm real excited to have him on the show because Komodo Platform is doing some really amazing stuff. Jason, how are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
So we met a few weeks ago back at World Crypto Con, and I had a really good conversation with you, and I thought it was kind of interesting how once you started explaining to me and educating me a little bit on what Comodo does, it actually made a whole lot more sense for me. I got a little more excited about it. So before we kind of jump into all the nitty gritty kind of stuff, tell us a little bit about you. How did you get into crypto, and how did you get into working for Comodo?
Sure. So back in 2012, when I was working overseas, I came across Bitcoin, and I think it was a Wired article. And I had heard about it before, but at that time, Mt. Gox was around, and the hype started really catching up. So I decided to buy my first Bitcoin, which was a lot harder back then than it is today, because there were no real exchanges no one accepted PayPal. There was no Coinbase. There was nothing. So I looked around on local Bitcoins, but the closest place to me was over in Japan at the time. So that's out the reach. And so then I found a site called Weirvox, which accepted Linden dollars as currency of a game called Second
Life. Yep, very familiar.
They exchanged Linden dollars for Bitcoin, so I was able to buy Linden dollars and exchange it for Bitcoin. Probably not the best rate, but it was my first Bitcoin. And then from there I just started investigating deep into the field. At the time there was some forks like Litecoin came out. The precursor of Dash called Darkcoin was out, and a bunch of basic forks of Bitcoin. And around 2014, I came across a project called NXT, and NXT blew away my mind. It was basically it was like the first real platform that anybody could just really build on top of without any in-depth coding knowledge. And it had a very lively community, and I just got involved. From NXT, there was a sub project called SuperNET, which was really the precursor of what Comodo is today, and they were working on cross-blockchain protocols and things to basically connect all these different blockchains, which were like islands, and we wanted to be like the bridges to all these different islands. So if you have coins on one chain but wanted to use a service on another chain, you had a way of doing such. And from that, around 2016, we started Comodo, and created the delayed proof of work consensus mechanism, which helps secure blockchains. And from there, we've been just developing this idea of a multi-chain architecture that we see the future of blockchain heading towards. So it's a cool quick history about me and how I got involved.
That's really cool. So you've been in crypto longer than some of my kids have been alive, so that's actually pretty cool. But it's funny because you say in this space, I mean, it's such a new industry, right? No one's been in this a long time, and this is a pet peeve of mine too. People that have are 30, I don't know how old you are, but I'm in my late 40s. So it's I see anybody who's in their 40s and they're in crypto, but you look at their LinkedIn and it only goes back 3 years. It's have you not done anything the last 30 years? What have you been doing? I always it's a big red flag for me. It's what have you been doing before crypto?
Right.
And it's fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of people, they caught on to the hype, and now everyone tries to be some expert because they, saw some YouTube videos and such. Before crypto, I worked in the nuclear industry. So to answer your question, I was a nuclear tech in 2 power plants in South Korea, and
wow,
lab tech and for Westinghouse. So I had some science background, and that's basically went from nuclear work to crypto. So
Well,
this space brings all types of people.
well, it does. And like, I'm an entrepreneur. I don't hide anything that I do. I still, like, my day job is a job you would never even know existed. I'm a floor inspector and a walkway auditor. And those are two jobs no one's ever heard of.
Yeah.
And there's like, but it's kind of interesting. I'm a forensic expert witness and consultant in the flooring world. And so I deal with like construction defects, and I deal with personal injury cases where people die and have serious injuries. And so I work all over the country doing that kind of work. And I still do it because Tusk is a community project. Everybody's got a day job. Everybody works a real job besides Tusk. And so I don't hide that. Even in my Twitter profile, I say I'm a floor nerd because that's what I am. But I've been in this space like 15 years. And I do really well. I'm actually pretty recognized in my industry because I'm pretty good at my job. But it's like, I don't hide that. I have if you go to my LinkedIn, I got my crypto stuff and my floor kind of stuff, and that's who I am. At least to me, it seems weird, but I'm an entrepreneur, and I've had other projects and businesses and stuff along the way too. So it's like, to me, this is not weird. But I'm being honest about who I am. But it's actually really techie too. You wouldn't think about it, but it's a lot of physics and concrete and assemblies and all sorts of stuff. So, but it's a really weird set of knowledge, and it's a niche, and I think it's just a fun niche. But I have a really flexible schedule, so I can actually
works for crypto.
Well, it's great because I get paid a lot when I'm working, and so essentially I have a full-time nice salary, so to speak, for part-time work. So I can work on crypto almost full-time and not have to worry about making a paycheck, because I haven't made any money off crypto as far as our project in the 2 years we've been doing it. In fact, I've spent a lot of money working on our absolutely over 2 years. So
yeah, it's the kind of nature of the beast. Yeah, you got to spend money to make money. But.
Absolutely, and I'm sure you guys are doing that with Comodo too. I mean, even a community. I mean, we didn't launch as our own blockchain originally, but it's like just going to conferences is expensive.
Yeah.
We were both in Vegas, and even if you're doing it on the cheap, it's still a couple grand for one guy just to go to a conference. I mean, minimum. Yeah. I mean, that's what it costs. Every meal's $20, and every hotel in the room's a couple $100 a night or whatever. It's like,
Vegas,
especially Vegas. So yeah, I think it's interesting, and I think that's cool that you came from kind of that background. And I wish more people were honest that they had a life before crypto, because it's so young that I would expect people would have a life before crypto.
Right.
But then you get all these like influencers that are in their mid-30s and they've done crypto for like a year, and that's their whole life. And I'm like, okay, what tells me is you were like working at like 7-Eleven before crypto. That's what I think. I mean, it may not be true, but I mean, don't hide who you are. I mean, and even if you came from the bottom, I would actually have more respect for people if they're like, yeah, I worked at 7-Eleven a year ago. I taught myself trading from watching books or reading books on technical analysis, and now I make $100 grand a year from my house. That's a story I want to share with people.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But they don't have that. It's like, no, I'm just here. And I'm like, okay. Anyways, I digress. Right. So Comodo, tell me a little bit about what does Comodo do? You guys do a lot of different things. And, when I first started looking at Comodo as a super non-developer, I'm more of a business guy, a marketing guy. Some of the stuff was like over my head. So basically, what would be the big problems that you guys are trying to address that right now that's what you can offer as a service?
Okay, so some of the big problems that Comodo as a platform and is trying to address is one is the security of smaller blockchains. We've seen 51% attacks happen across many different coins and exchanges, being robbed essentially because of these attacks. And it ruins the credibility of that chain, and and a lot of these chains end up dying off if they get attacked often enough. So Comodo, one of the major things we do is provide a layer of protection called delayed proof of work for these small chains that can't get enough miners on their chain to be to prevent such an attack. And today it's a lot easier to do these 51% attacks now on small chains than it was in the past. In these days we have nice hash and mining rig rentals, and even many farms and stuff you can contract out to rent out their hardware. So a chain that only has maybe a couple hundred ASICs worth on it can easily be overpowered by some guy who's just willing to spend some money in nice hash. So this is a real problem for smaller chains. To help them out. And also because we are a multi-chain ecosystem, so that we have these problems as well. We created this system that essentially checkpoints onto the Bitcoin blockchain. So to reverse a transaction or to reorganize a block, essentially, past a certain notarization point, you would have to attack the Bitcoin blockchain first. And then also attack your target chain as well. So this makes it a lot harder for an attacker to execute this kind of attack onto a blockchain.
So if I had a proof of work blockchain, right? So this is for proof of work only chains?
It can be done for other types of chains, so hybrids, proof of stake as well. Proof of stake has some different kind of attack vectors than proof of work chains, but it's primarily made for proof of work chains, yes.
So if I just, and I don't have a proof of work chain, but if say I had a proof of work chain project that I was working on, so do you guys come in, you're coming in just like and supplying a bunch of hash power to kind of insulate the blockchain, or are you basically combining with their blockchain, or is it more like a denial of service protection? Well, what kind of vector, how does that actually integrate, I guess is the question.
Okay. To integrate delayed proof of work, we have a group of 64 nodes that will all run a full node of the chain we're trying to protect. And so there's normal nodes on the network, but every so often, every 10 minutes, they take the latest block hash and then they write that block hash first onto the Comodo chain, and they write the block hash that all the protected chains block hashes are on into the Bitcoin blockchain in a transaction. So this can be referenced if somebody is trying to do a reorg attack. So what that is that a miner will mine privately. Basically they'll take a chain, they'll split into, they'll mine privately one, and they'll mine normally the other. And they'll send a transaction on the real chain, okay? And then at a later point of time, they, with their private chain, which they have tons of hash rate on, they basically broadcast that as the real chain, because so much more of the hash rate, because his paid hash rate agrees with that private chain, it basically rewrites the history of the blockchain. So with these notarizations, they can only do that only to a certain depth, and because of how expensive financially and computationally this is, trying to reorg within that 10 block period is not very feasible. It's doable. And if there was a sensitive transaction, you could just say, hey, you have to wait till the notarization is done. And then once the notarization is done, it's good. So basically the nodes, they're full nodes on the protected network. They view the incoming block hashes. They write it to the Comodo chain, which writes it to the Bitcoin chain. If somebody tries to attack the protected chain, it could reference these hashes on Bitcoin's blockchain or on the Comodo chain, and just to see, hey, is this the correct hash, or is this somebody trying to reorg the blockchain?
So is this something you said that for newer chain, does that mean that over time that they would wean off of this network, or was this like a relationship that you would like to see go on permanently for some of these chains?
Well, so with how much hardware that there is out there, unless a smaller chain could somehow convince the miners to switch over there, and they become a dominant hash rate for their particular algorithm, then they wouldn't need delayed proof of work. But the reality is, even amongst large hash rate chains, unless you are the most dominant by hash rate for your algorithm, you're under threat of a 51% attack. So it's very hard for smaller chains to be fully protected against this type of attack. For example, Ethereum Classic, quite a large network compared to many blockchains out, proof of work chains out there, had an attack happen on it, which was a 300 block deep reorg. That wouldn't have happened with our delayed proof of work system because they only could go back 10 blocks. So,
Wow.
so even chains that have massive amounts of hash rate still face this threat. And the only one that we sort of for sure doesn't really have this type of attack vector is Bitcoin itself, because the massive amount of hash rate and the differences between the I guess you'd call pool ideologies, that they would always compete against each other instead of trying to attack the network, which would effectively lessen Bitcoin's credibility.
So, and you don't have to answer this, but how do you make money with that? How do you, if you were going to engage with like a smaller proof of work chain, how do you guys like monetize that work that you're doing?
Okay, so since Comodo is a community project as well, it's the service providers who integrate this are the ones who would be monetizing it. There's a fee for the integration, because all the notary nodes have to run a copy of the protected chains blockchain. So that's server space and bandwidth and all that stuff, and then just also the integration part itself, the code that needs put in. So that cost is dependent on the chain. If it's a Komodo based chain, which is a lot more compatible, it's pretty cheap. It's around $5,000 a year.
Okay, it's not bad at all.
Yeah, for a normal Bitcoin based chain that doesn't need much of anything, it's a little bit more, 7 to 10. But if it's like a custom chain, it might require a bunch of specific work for that chain to get it to work, but it shouldn't be too difficult. So you're looking between $5,000 and $10,000, typically for this delayed proof of work protection. And like I say, it gets paid to the service provider who actually implements it. And we have several in our ecosystem that we recommend projects to.
Oh, so it's a kind of like a vendor, like a part of the community part of the Komodo platform community actually has vendors that are doing their own kind of like side hustle and participate that way.
Correct. Yes, it's like sort of like in WordPress, right? So WordPress itself is the free software to build websites and stuff with, but there's many different businesses that build plugins or themes that you can buy to aid onto the initial core of WordPress. So very similar situation in Comodo, that we offer the core, and the core stuff's free, but like if you want to have your own module created or this protection added, you have to go through a third party.
Makes sense. I was just at WordCamp a couple weeks ago too, so good times. So tell me talk about Barter Dex. What is the Barter Dex piece of your ecosystem all about?
Okay, so Barter Dex, which now is called Atomic Dex, Barter Dex was the previous version. It is our implementation of atomic swap technology, which allows two people to exchange trustlessly between each other with no third party in between. This works for pretty much all Bitcoin-based coins, as well as Ethereum and ERC20. And we are currently working on getting other types of coins and other types of things like assets and tokens to be able to be atomic swappable as well right now. So we can effectively offer over 90% of the existing crypto world the ability to trustlessly exchange with each other. And this has a lot of benefits for users and for businesses who would like to use this as well. The biggest thing is security. We've heard of tons of exchange hacks happen. Even the great Binance got hacked for thousands of Bitcoin, right? And
right.
So when you use a centralized exchange, you're depositing your coins with them, and they hold it all into various addresses, but they're all pooled together, more or less. And so that's an attractive target for a hacker to go after. where with Atomic Dex, each user, has their own coins. They control the private key to their coins. So it's, basically there's no giant target for a hacker to attack like that. It's all spread out amongst everybody. If the hacker, luckily comes across somebody's private key, it doesn't affect everybody else's funds. So that's one of the big benefits. The other big benefit is there's no, because it's a peer-to-peer protocol, there's no KYC, no AML that's required of users to use this. And this is another big thing, and I'll bring up Binance again, is that just after that exchange hack where they lost thousands of Bitcoin, there was a KYC hack where they stole a bunch of users, like ID as their passport photos, all their information they had to input to get verified on the exchange. I believe BitMEX actually had something like this happen as well recently. So now all this information that you submitted to a centralized exchange is floating on the dark web up for bid for the highest bidder, and they could use that for various identity fraud crimes.
SIM hacks, SIM swaps, and things like that.
Oh yeah, opening a loan in your name, like.
Well, what's worse about that is that if they got your information from like a big centralized exchange, they know you have crypto somewhere, and now
Exactly.
they got like a good lead to try to dig that out. And so I think that could be used to do targeted attacks. And I'm getting more paranoid about my own personal security and online security and my privacy. And it's funny because I just deleted like 50,000 emails out of one of my accounts because I was using it like a database, which I didn't realize that was a big, huge problem. So I fixed that problem. And it was interesting. And I'm getting so paranoid. The other day I downloaded an app, which I'm real excited about using. And then they mandate that you upload your entire phone book, address book, to their app. It won't even allow you to go any further unless they don't give you an option to not allow your entire address book to be used. And I talked to the owner of this thing, and I said, I'm not giving you I asked him first, I said, who gets that information? Is it just looking at it on my thing, or is it uploading to your database? Like, well, we upload it, but we won't share it with anybody. I'm like, I didn't argue with them, but I'm like, what happens if you get hacked? Now you have all my contacts, which could also, and lots of people's contacts, which could be used for, social engineering, all sorts of attacks. I'm getting really paranoid, but I decided not to use the app because of that, so it's like, I think people need to think about that. So with Atomic Dex, so here's a question I have about as a project, are those transactions, like the volume of those transactions, tracked anywhere like CoinMarketCap or CoinGecko or any of those other tracking services?
Currently, we have just a private way of tracking them. It pulls the order book and it just displays it. But no, currently there is no like official source right now. We do plan on releasing a way of displaying the statistics of the use of the exchange. Like what trades are available, how much volume, what's the liquidity, things like that.
Do you have volume posted? Do you know what the volume is now? Is on the network, or is that proprietary right now?
Currently it's not much. We are just in the beta testing stage right now. So we're just making sure everything works right. We just had our first stress test happen on Halloween actually, and we started becoming saturated around 100,000 orders on a single order book. And our previous incarnation that was in Barter Dex was able to handle 3 to 4 times as much. So we found some areas where to vastly improve, and we plan on having another stress test here in about a month or so. The statistics for the usage and stuff are not out yet, just because it's still really new. It's the first mobile atomic swap DEX, so we're still hammering out bugs, but so far it does work pretty well. There are some orders, but there isn't much going on just right now.
So I'll give you my unsolicited advice, which everybody loves as coming from as a project, right? projects are stuck in this box, right? That especially community projects that didn't do illegal ICOs and things, is that we're not able to really get on decent exchanges unless we have, a certain amount of volume on smaller exchanges. It's kind of like a really stupid catch-22. That's one of those metrics. I don't think it's a great metrics necessarily for how crypto products are evaluated, but it is one right now. I personally, my personal ethos is I would love, at least with our project, our Tusk project, that we just be all on apps that are atomic swap type apps personally. Because I think to me, that's the future. I still, believe it or not, like the original essence of the Satoshi white paper, peer-to-peer digital cash. And to me, I think that what's happened is that the exchanges have gotten so much power now, and they can pick the winners and losers now. And there's so much fraud with volumes and things like that. But on the other hand, so for our strategy, I would love to get on as many atomic swap type apps as possible, because I think that actually is the better way that I think crypto will get adopted and actually be used. If people could just really conveniently move back and forth between cryptos on a mobile device, that to me is the best and has the least amount of friction. However, as a project though, most of those apps are not reporting that volume to the trackers. And so in a lot of ways, we don't get credit for it. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't. So how do you say, well, I'm on 20 apps and we're getting a lot of these on-chain volumes, but none of that's tracked centrally. And to me, I'm just giving you a heads up. If you could get that volume, that on-chain volume tracked, I think that would be really helpful to a lot of community projects.
Yes,
because it helps us.
I agree. And just for potential traders who are looking at trying a new exchange and stuff too, they want to see the volume on the exchange before they even try it. So we do have it in the in our plan and in the pipeline. It's just because right now it's so know that Atomic Dex, the mobile app, just got released in mid-July, so it's only a couple months old. But we do plan on doing this to like you said, help smaller coins to track their volume so they can have more statistics to show.
Be a real boy.
Yeah.
So is this a native app, or is this like a responsive, just mobile web app?
No, this is a native app, but we do have a web browser version being built as well. But currently, it's a native app.
Is it for iOS or Google Android?
Both iOS and
nice.
Google.
Well, when you get that out, let me know, because I'd love to be a beta tester for that kind of thing.
You can actually, if you have it right now, you can just download it right now. It's on Google Play right now to download, and iOS requires test flight. So yeah, I'll send you the link for that.
Sweet, as long as you don't want my address book.
No.
But seriously, I think that to me is we need more of that. And to me, I'm not a maxi, right? And I like a lot of projects. I'm also bearish on a lot of projects that are considered big projects now. I just I really kind of look at things differently than a lot of people in crypto. But to me, my ideal future isn't like there being one coin to rule them all. To me, I think it's much better if there were 300 or 400 really strong chains out there that were built for specific uses in industries that all swap between one another. To me, that's so much more decentralized. And so for instance, if Bitcoin, for instance, became like the only major crypto on the planet that people were really relying on for buying and selling, which it isn't now. Yeah. And if you got one big dog, what's that?
Be a sad day if that were the case, especially if they're 10-minute block times and
2-day confirmation times. Yeah. But if you think about it though, but this is what a lot of maxis actually want, and I don't care if it's an ETH maxi or an LTC maxi or a Bitcoin maxi, right? They all kind of have this weird vision that their God needs to win. And to me, I said, well, look at it this way. If you were like usurping national fiats across the globe, and your community now has all that wealth centered on you've just made enemies of state level actors that have access to quantum computers. And all it takes is, what happens now if the whole globe is like on one crypto and it goes down? I mean, it's catastrophic. I mean, think of it like fiats right now. If you think about fiats, right now, every country has its own fiat, right? So if you think about it, and they kind of swap between one another. So there's 130, 150, paper fiat kind of currencies. That's kind of decentralized. If you think of a country as a community, right now the globe already has hundreds or 150 or so that kind of do that. It's really easy to swap between fiat currencies right now. So I think there already is an analog for this. And I think that basically, if you had the Maxi's dream of one coin, you basically have centralized something that already was decentralized to some extent.
Yeah, I don't understand the maximalist thinking. At Comodo, we already came in with the idea that there was going to be multiple chains. I mean, that's just look around. Even in crypto, there's 4,000 some projects on CoinMarketCap even now, and let alone all the ones being built in private or are some closed system. And so I agree with you. It's not going to be a one chain feature. I think that's very naive thinking. It's just, I mean, from a technical perspective, can you imagine everybody trying to do everything on one chain? Blocks would be filled. There'd be some crazy fee market. There'd be delays in getting things done, and then not to mention the politics, like we've seen with Bitcoin and Ethereum. So it's maximalism. I think those are guys who just want their bags to go up.
Yeah. You know what? I used to think that they were just hardcore guys that really think. I think there's a lot of ego involved, and if you think about it, right, a lot of these are the same guys that have no LinkedIn history 4 or 5 years ago, and they've been telling everybody for 5 years how great their one project is. I think here's the thing. I think psychologically, when you wrap your identity and your ego around that project, you can't change your mind when things change, right? You're so wrapped up into that's mentally or socially, you can't come. Well, I've been telling everybody on the planet to buy this one coin for 5 years, and now I see the market's changed, and maybe I was wrong, or maybe there's some better things that have come along. But oh no, I can't admit that. No one wants to admit they're wrong.
Right.
Or they don't want to be proven wrong, even worse, right? So I think there's a lot of that. And here's the weird thing, Jason, when I stayed out of crypto for 5 years. I mean, I've known about Bitcoin and crypto for a long, long time. But you know why I stayed out before I started investing and getting excited about it? It was the Maxis. They were toxic. They were obnoxious. And I always started off saying, I don't take investment from guys living in their mom's basement that, can't even hold a job down, kind of thing. And that's what a lot of the early guys that were in crypto, that stereotype kind of fit with a lot of those guys. And I'm like, I'm just not really interested in giving you and your community a whole bunch of my cash, even though this sounds interesting. And it took really meeting a lot of some really, really smart people that were a little more realistic in the space before I actually started opening up and investing in crypto. But even now, a lot of those early guys, I think they were wrong. So, I mean, even my initial assessment of okay, you're kind of a dipshit. I was right on them. They kind of are dipshits. And these guys turned out to be the Maxis. And I think, Bitcoin is amazing proof of, concept. I think it's great at what it does. I'm not sure that, I think that there's been better technologies that come out since Bitcoin came out. And I think that the governance problem is one of those things that I think a lot of people overlook. I mean, the one concern I have about a lot of these proof of work kind of communities is that when they have a conflict, the whole community fractures in a very toxic and public way. There's no way to do conflict resolution when that happens. And then everybody else just sees, wow, on the outside, wow, you guys can't deal with your shit. It's like,
yeah.
And that's not good. I mean, if you look at it from the standpoint, think about what crypto is, right? I mean, we're asking people to take what was normally in a bank, like their 401ks, like, and that could be for a lot of, middle class people, that can be a lot of money. And we're now telling them to invest in this new thing, and then you look at how that thing is being governed. And you're like, I'm not putting my money with those guys. They can't even like get along with each other. And their avatar is like some furry rodent cartoon guy. And, it's like, so, I mean, I think in a lot of ways, crypto is its own worst enemy from an adoption standpoint,
Yeah.
Because of that. And I think that's actually I think the maxis are actually holding crypto back in a lot of respects. And they won't ever admit it. They won't think that. But that's just my belief on it. And I hope it changes. And I think it is changing as good projects come in here. Guys like you with Comodo and other things that are trying to do really good stuff and solve real problems. I think that's going to change, but it's not going very quickly, unfortunately. So you guys just talk a little bit about the Antara module. This is something you guys have been working on.
Sure. So Antara is our blockchain creation platform. And our modules allow people to add their own form of consensus on top of the traditional consensus found in proof of work chains. So what this means is that, I'll give you an example. If you're familiar with gaming at all, people often have competitions to see, who's the best gamer. There was, like first-person shooter games like Counter-Strike. They have these types of competitions, and
Day of Defeat. I love Day of Defeat and Natural Selection. Did you ever play any of those? Oh, those.
No, not those ones. Sorry.
Oh, well, they were on Counter-Strike, the Half-Life so they were just hack mods.
I mean, I used to play long time ago. So
I'm old.
It's okay. So one of the things we know about this game is people like to cheat, specifically with like aimbots and stuff. That they're always going to hit their target and so on. But what if you could recreate all of the movement, all the keystrokes, all of the ways they moved and everything? You were able to recreate every step and to check to see if, like, hey, he moved his keys this way. Is this what happened in game? And you can sort of determine if they're cheating or not. Now take this idea and put it on top of a blockchain, that a transaction won't be valid unless it's replicatable by every node in the network. We've actually created a module called CC Rogue. Rogue was a early game from the 1980s. It was like a dungeon crawling game. It was done in ASCII, so there wasn't really even any no visual stuff. It was just like characters and stuff. It's very simplistic, but the idea of Rogue, it's like I said, dungeon crawler. You get to the end and you win. But people would cheat at these games. But with our module, you're able to replicate all of the users' movements and what they interacted with, and so you can see, hey, is this like item that they claim they have, is it real, or did they clone an item and somehow get it, or and this allows chains to validate programs that aren't your traditional like financial ledger style programs like we see with blockchains today. So we can add a layer of blockchain enforced consensus on top of other types of programs. It's basically what the Antara modules are. So this expands blockchain functionality quite greatly. One of the issues of blockchains, or at least Bitcoin protocol-based blockchains, is that they're not Turing complete. This has been somewhat solved with Ethereum-style chains with their interpretive smart contracts. However, we can now, with these modules, sort of emulate that Turing completeness with, and still have a Bitcoin-based chain. So that's another benefit of this as well.
So is it just more of a security layer on top of like a Bitcoin-based chain, or is it actually more, does that add actually additional smart contract functionality to like
it adds additional functionality as well. So to give another example, what if you had a module that said that transactions, I mean, just come off the top of my head, that can't be sent to a certain address, like blacklists, whitelisting, also time locks, things that we see in blockchains now. We can actually add those same types of rules to other programs and have them verified by the chain itself. So this adds basically it's a new way of doing the smart contracts as compared to Ethereum, where you put the contracts on chain, you have to run through it. If there's an issue, then you're trying to convince the chain itself to either roll back or have to fork to update the contract. Some contracts have a way built in that they can update, but if something happens wrong on a with these modules, then the whole network knows, and they know to update instead of some political back and forth of, well, why should we roll back our chain, or why should we do hard fork, and so on. So this style of doing smart contracts is a little bit different than what you would find on other platforms, but it allows for a lot more benefits than traditional smart contracts.
That's kind of cool, actually. I think there's a lot of potential applications for that. So as far as the Atomic Dex and these modules, what other kind of interesting things do you have kind of in your long-term horizon with Komodo Platform?
So one of the things we've been working on is a pegged asset system. So if you're familiar with Maker or MakerDAO and DAI, that's a system for Ethereum's stablecoins. We've created a similar type of system to be used. It's a module, so you can add this to any chain that's created with Komodo, but we're planning on adding it to the Komodo main chain itself. That you could deposit Komodo and then issue a stablecoin. Now, what makes this different than MakerDAO and DAI is that it's not limited to Komodo as a deposit, and it's not limited to US dollar as a pegged asset. So you could basically do any to any type of transaction. Say you deposit Dash and get Dash Euro, so a coin that's pegged to the euro but backed by Dash. So I think this type of system is going to see a lot of use because there is a method of liquidations and such that a lot of traders might like in terms of profit taking, and it brings more of the traditional forex and stock trading to blockchain.
Do you think something like that could work for gaming tokens? Like you were talking earlier about like Linden dollars from Second Life. I'm wondering if there's an application that could be used with that.
Well, they would need to. I'm sure something could be made. There's very little that can't be coded up, but crossing over a centralized system like Linden dollars and issuing a decentralized coin would require some deep thought on how to make that work. But I'm pretty positive that is doable. Some issues you have to consider, like if it's on a centralized system, what's to stop, the owner of the game from blocking your account, like as we see on World of Warcraft or any MMORPG, if you violate their terms of service somehow. And then how is that going to affect the blockchain tied version, or if you're backing it with Linden dollars, how's that going to affect the coin that was issued from that backing if the backing got banned or restricted somehow? So I'm not saying it's not doable, it's just there's a lot of thought that has to go into that process.
Oh, trust me, the people part, the governance part is the hardest part of all this stuff.
Right.
Like I tell people, even forking, a project, like, you start with another project's code base, and we spent probably 6 months just trying to figure out how to manage it and how it should be governed. That's the hard part. Everybody talks about, code this, code that. You got good coders, really, the coding's not that complicated. If you got some real, it can be, but in the scope of things, in my mind, you have to, when you're trying to figure out the whole governance piece, one, you got to find something that people will think is fair, right? and then you got to figure out a system that is less likely to be gamed or cheated. You know, and then a system that people will use, and all those things are really, really complicated. And so that's what I try to, tell people, that, making a crypto project, the coding part's super hard. I mean, it's challenging. There's no doubt about that. And I'm lucky that I got really, really smart people that know that stuff when I kind of explain, this is what I want in my brain. How do we make that happen? But, it's interesting, but trying to work out all the ways people can do bad shit when you're building a project, that's the complicated part. And so I'm always just looking, I don't have to know how something's coded, but if I understand what capabilities are out there, it always just makes me think, because I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur. So I'm always looking like, how could this work in this scenario? I'm always trying to, there's people that are like applied science people, like you got the people that are theoretical, and then like a nuclear technician might be more applied nuclear science. I think like I'm an applied entrepreneur. Like I always kind of think like, all right, I don't need to know how to code that, but I want to understand how I can use that. And so that's how my mind works. And but you need both, of course. Well, I do appreciate you coming on the show, because, I'm a big fan of what you guys do. Now that I understand it a little more, I'm even a bigger fan. So where can people find out more about Komodo Platform?
People can find out more about us at our website at comodoplatform.com. We have a lively community on our Discord. If you search for Komodo Platform Discord, and join us. We'll be more than happy to, explain more about our technology. And if you have a project in mind, we have many helpful developers that will help guide you on your path.
Jason Brown, thank you so much today for coming on the show.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Rob McNealy program. Make sure you check us out on the web at robmcnealy.com and subscribe to our podcast at YouTube, iTunes, and on the Google Play Store.